I bet you've heard this before. The Earth is flat, the moon landing is fake, and Elvis is alive. None of that is true, but conspiracy theories in your communities and feeds can still convince you. How did they do that? It's so good to have you with us. I'm Molly Thomas, and this is Big If True. Conspiracy theories are not new. From claims about secret societies to microchips and vaccines, these stories have fascinated and misled people for years. And we are not immune. According to a 2023 poll, nearly 80% of Canadians believed at least one conspiracy claim. Tonight, an expert helps us understand the minds of true believers. We'll also learn about the networks pushing wild theories online. Plus, we'll explore the global impacts of these twisted stories. But let's start with research coming out of Canada on this very topic. A hot button issue at Montreal's Media Ecosystem Observatory is conspiratorial claims. The organization identified 8 of the most common conspiracies making waves in Canada. There's everything from the government allegedly faking environmental data to expand control over Canadians, to wildfires being deliberately set to advance an eco-agenda, to schools supposedly promoting a radical gender ideology without parental knowledge or consent. Digital IDs are often a trending topic too.
Because if access is digital and identity is digital and participation requires compliance, what happens to the people that say no?
With fears over a deep state where powerful elites secretly pull all the strings. Alleged election fraud is a popular talking point, with some Canadians questioning the vote count.
Where's all the sick people? Where's all the COVID patients?
There's also accusations that public health threats like COVID-19 are exaggerated to enable authoritarian control.
There's all kinds of conspiracy theories going around about COVID-19. Are you concerned about them, and what more can you do to fight them?
And we know this one well. False beliefs that the media and so-called elites are in cahoots, supposedly trying to manipulate your opinion. One of the lead authors of that report is Mika DeBlanc-Patel. He works with the Media Ecosystem Observatory and joins us from Montreal today. Great to see you, Mika.
Great to see you too.
Okay, I was fascinated with some of the stats in your report. What surprised you the most?
Yeah, I think that one of the most staggering facts of our report is that 100 users, 100 entities in our data set were responsible for about 68% of the posts, gathered 86% of the likes, and got 90% of the views on posts pushing conspiratorial narratives. So this is more to say that on social media, we're reading the opinions mostly of a tiny fraction of users who have huge impact over the opinions and the awareness levels of Canadians online.
You said entities. Like, how would you define that?
We didn't want to say accounts because, for example, a user might have 4 different accounts. The other thing is that not everyone online is, in fact, a person. And so we use the term entities to account for the fact that people and organizations have multiple accounts.
So they're on all these different accounts. I'm curious as to where the conspiracy theories are showing up the most.
It appears to be an X problem, where we found that on X, formerly Twitter, was responsible for about almost 93% of conspiratorial content of the posts, gathering up almost 99% of views and 70% of likes.
Why do you think that is, Mika?
I think that my intuition is that since Musk bought the platform, he's brought a lot of his political opinions, and people have migrated to X and seen it as a sort of like bastion of alternative news that people might not get from mainstream news sources.
Mika, I'm curious about who is believing these conspiracy theories in Canada. Do we have any information on the demographic?
We did find that compared to the average Canadian, Blue Sky users, YouTube users, Instagram users were more or less similar to what your average Canadian would look like. So the average belief and awareness rates of a Canadian. X users, on the other hand, were a lot more believing and a lot more aware of the various conspiracies.
And is it men? Is it women? Is it both?
Men are a little bit more susceptible to be both believing and aware, but we didn't find the differences to be as staggering as the uniqueness of X users, who are a lot more aware and a lot more believing than the rest of Canadian.
Your report touches on the deep state. I was looking at election fraud, digital IDs. What is the impact of these conspiracy theories on Canadians?
Well, we found that awareness levels did tend to be high. Belief levels were low, mostly between 8%, with the highest conspiracy theories gaining about 19 to 20%. So the one on gender indoctrination, that kids were indoctrinated with radical gender ideology in schools, or media elite collusion, that's mainstream media and politicians and political elites are conspiring to manipulate public opinions. Those are the ones where we saw the highest belief rates at around 19 and 20% respectively. The fact that awareness levels are so high is in and of itself problematic. We know, for example, down south in the United States, there's been, recent measles outbreaks. Even though we know that the percentage of people in the United States that believe in conspiratorial narratives regarding vaccines is low, the outbreak is still happening. And we know that in Canada last year, we had one of the biggest measles outbreak in a very long time. So even though very few people believe in conspiratorial narratives about vaccines, for example, that has had an impact on the spread of something that is preventable with vaccines.
Mika, how do we, stop the spread of conspiracy claims? I know it's a big question, but how?
We did find some interesting results, especially regarding, so before we said that X users were much more believing and much more aware, but on the flip side, we also found that low social media users were a lot less believing and then a lot less aware than your average Canadian. So the whole saying, touch grass does work. We do know, however, that that's not a luxury that everyone can have. We know that local news outlets are struggling financially, and that social media platforms are sometimes the only place in which people can get news about what's happening in their community. So some of the things that we would encourage is just be a lot more hyper aware of what you're seeing online and adopt a much more active stance on the content that you're seeing.
Looking forward, it's 2026. What's on your radar for conspiracy theories that are coming down the pipeline?
The thing with conspiracy theories is that they morph and they change and they come up, and it's very hard to, keep up to date on everything that people are saying. I know that we are pushing for certain policy implementations that we hope to see in the near future in Canada regarding transparency on how the recommendation system works for different platforms, to give people more control over their feeds. Most of the content that people see on social media is algorithmically driven. Algorithms are optimized for attention, not informativeness of different posts. And we think that users should have control over how the content is organized for them.
We reached out to X about claims that its users had the highest level of awareness and belief in conspiracy theories. The company did not respond. Well, we all know someone who's gone down that rabbit hole and can't wait to argue their findings with the family at Thanksgiving dinner. So why are some people so susceptible to conspiracies? We have a lot of questions for psychology professor Gordon Pennycook today. He teaches at Cornell University and joins us from Ithaca, New York. Okay, I'm so curious, how do people deep in conspiracy theories see the world?
One I think important thing to know is that they don't see the world that differently from us, except they're seeing a different version of it. So the same kind of psychological processes that lead you to believe things that are true also lead people to believe things that are false. And part of the thing that people kind of fail to understand about conspiracy theorists is that they think there's some sort of big material defect with their mind. But often a lot of the problem is that they fell down the rabbit hole. The same process that leads someone down the rabbit hole is what leads somebody out of it, when basically that's just being exposed to too much stuff.
What's the line then in your mind, Gordon, between healthy skepticism and conspiratorial thinking? Where do you draw the line?
Healthy skepticism is really about questioning whether things are accurate or not. But true skepticism is not just being skeptical of the world, it's being skeptical of yourself, being intellectually humble, right? And so the line essentially is, are you willing to accept the possibility that you might be wrong about this? Another thing that's kind of unique to conspiracies is that it does provide this kind of like grand unifying narrative that really makes sense of the world. People kind of have the connection between believing these conspiracies and feeling more control of the world, but that's not actually how it works, because if you live in a world where you believe there are these secret actors who are controlling everything, that's not a good world to live in. It's
Right,
not
right.
like a positive thing.
We're living in a
It might
false
be,
world with false fears as well.
yeah, exactly. And so like it's kind of like pablum, like it's like it might be sort of appealing in the moment, but it doesn't really provide the right sort of answers for people.
If I'm watching one of my friends, for example, maybe go through a divorce, lose a loved one, suddenly, lose a job or economic status, should we be watching those people more closely?
Especially when it comes to conspiracies, a lot of it is like around anger, and they're putting their anger onto some other kind of group or set of people, and whoever the people who are controlling the world or whatever. And I mean, it's just another form of like this goes back to the argument about empathy. Like the conspiracies is kind of like a consequence of a deeper set of problems that we need to face in terms of like dealing with people's underlying mental health issues.
So we should watch for that in conversation and question it, challenge it, have a bigger discussion. Don't run from it, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and one of the problems that, especially, this is true even on social media, like people think that social media is this place where people are constantly debating, but most of the research shows that very few people correct anybody else online. Most people, they just ignore it. And what that feels like to the person who's posting is agreement, right? You post something crazy, 3 people like it, and you think, well, 3 people like it, that's good. But in reality, like 200 people looked at it and thought it was crazy, but they didn't tell you.
Right.
So that it really distorts our view of consensus. And we have this other experiment where we ask people who believe conspiracies to estimate the percent of people that agree with them. Okay, so for example, take the Sandy Hook false flag conspiracy. This was kind of a crazy conspiracy that the Sandy Hook massacre was like a false flag that didn't actually happen. Alex Jones was famous for furthering this conspiracy. 8% of people thought it was true. So we asked that 8% of people, like, what percent of people do you think agree with you? They thought 61% of people agreed with them. So they thought they were in the majority. They didn't realize it was a fringe belief at all. Some of that has to do with the fact that they're like talking with people online, but also like when you bring it up to people, most people, they might even go along with it or they'll change the subject. Very few people are like, well, that doesn't make sense.
Right.
And you really need the corrections in order to have like accurate beliefs. We really kind of need each other to have accurate views, because that's really how the truth comes out, right?
How do we emotionally engage when it comes to a family member that has a conspiracy theory in mind?
I think we need to remove the moralistic element of it. People think they have this attribution, but it goes both ways. Like the person who is down the rabbit hole thinks everybody else are they're sheeple too, and that we have a hard time dealing with disagreement. We kind of take that as being like, how can you possibly disagree with me? There must be something wrong with you. But in reality, they just they're living a different life than you are. And so there are places in our lives where we can accept that sort of thing. But when it comes to kind of beliefs, we somehow now we are happy to say, well, the reason that you believe something that doesn't make sense to me is because you're dumb, or you make mistakes, or you don't care about the truth. But we have to kind of have a better appreciation of like the kind of journey that people take and how they get to where they believe something that is crazy. And often, a lot of times, the crazy beliefs are because people are being targeted, by people who are trying to misinform them. And so it's like actually an equity issue. And so, I mean, the basic underlying idea is that we need to have more empathy for people. Even though they disagree with you, it doesn't mean that they're malicious about it, or that they even understand the things that you've experienced. So we have to kind of have more empathy about the disagreements. And that often is also useful in terms of making the conversations more pleasant.
So are any of us susceptible?
This is the biggest problem that people have, I think, often, is that we all think we're kind of invulnerable to falsehoods. We've done experiments, for example, that we show that even a single prior exposure to like a completely like fabricated news headline, like a fake news headline, increases subsequent belief in the headline. It just seems more plausible. We have a DebunkBot website. So if you go to debunkbot.com, it's like we've prompted the AI to debunk the conspiracy. So if you just go to the website, you can put the conspiracy and it'll tell you.
I love
the
that.
counter argument.
Debunkbot.com. Gordon, is there one conspiracy theory in your mind that you would love to be debunked right now?
That's a great question. I would love to debunk or to know the facts of whether Epstein actually killed himself or not. This is a case, and we actually see this in some of our own, because we have all these conversations that people have about conspiracies. It's like there's a range of plausibility around conspiracies, and so the AI is really good at debunking the conspiracies that are the most kind of like separated from reality, you might say, like the Earth is flat and scientists are covering it up. And there are ones that it struggles more with because there's like uncertainty around the underlying facts. And I think the Epstein case is one of the ones that the AI has like a pretty good counter argument, but it could be better, and I would love to know more of the facts around that.
Gordon, great to have you on the show today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, conspiracy theories can draw you in because sometimes everyone else really does have it wrong. Here's Sean Foreman addressing misinfo of astronomical proportions. And if you're a longtime viewer, you might remember this segment from season 1.
Wait, what?
Do you ever have the feeling that you're right and everyone else is wrong? Well, sometimes that's true. At least it was for Galileo. Galileo was a 17th century Italian astronomer, physicist, and engineer who believed, and was correct to believe, that the Earth rotated around the sun and not the other way around. This angered the Roman Catholic Church, who strongly believed that the entire solar system rotated around our tiny blue planet, Earth. For this belief, Galileo was put under house arrest for the rest of his life. While Galileo was right and the establishment was wrong, this isn't always the case. In these complicated times of ours, many people feel that if they're being vilified by the establishment, they must be right. This is known as the Galileo Gambit. We saw this a lot during the pandemic, with certain medical professionals contradicting the medical consensus on vaccines. These medical professionals were criticized by the medical community. Rather than this diminishing their influence, it actually kind of heightened it, with their supporters believing that if they're facing persecution, they must be the ones telling the truth. When it comes to science and medicine, consensus is essential. This consensus is arrived at through years of study and peer evaluation. While it's totally possible for one individual to be right and the majority to be wrong, that's not often the case. And even if it was, the onus would be on the person leveling the extraordinary claim to prove it by providing evidence. The fact is, not everyone is Galileo.
Well, joining us now to talk about the global risks of conspiracy theories is Philip Mai, Executive Director and Senior Researcher of the Social Media Lab at Toronto Metropolitan University. Philip, great to have you on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, I want to know what global conspiracy theories are really gaining traction right now?
Well, there's actually quite a few that's been floating around for years. So you have things like, New World Order, where supposedly there's a global governance structure that's trying to control all of the, big organizations like the UN, the World Economic Forum, the International Monetary Funds, and then some of the other ones, population control via the World Health Organization, via vaccine program and disease control. For the last 50 years, we've been able to reduce, child mortality rates. But over the years, it has morphed into something more, where people start believing that, hey, these things that are meant to help us as a people are somehow done to hurt us. And that's why you see things like, vaccine hesitancy and sometimes outright refusal.
I think about, organizations like the WHO or the World Economic Forum. I mean, how do conspiracy theories affect the work they're even trying to do?
When they're trying to pass, new regulations, stuff like that, it's more difficult because it's more difficult for countries that are members of these organizations to go back home and try to get buy-in from their citizens. So sometimes you will have people spending years negotiating some of these multilateral agreements, and then it takes decades afterward to get them to pass by the legislature in each of the signatory countries. So sometimes it might take years for things to go into effect because there will be a country or two that's a holdout because they are a hotbed for a lot of conspiracy theories.
So there can be trickle-down effects even from global discussions into, our own legislatures or our own municipal governments. I'm wondering, if I'm sitting in Barrie, Ontario thinking, who cares if those big organizations are targeted? Like, why does it affect my life? What would you say to someone?
It does affect your life because many of the problems that we're facing today requires countries working together. So even if we were to do something in Canada, it won't have the impact that it needs to have or can have if other countries can't agree on it. For example, if you want environmental type changes and regulation, you have to do it also at a multilateral type of action, because things don't stay in just one country. The smog that get released in one part of the world don't stay in that part of the world. It travels around.
What happens if we can't get some of these conspiracy theories, into a place where we can empathetically work on the same team to fact check these things?
It will lead to a further breakdown of democracy as we know it, simply because for democracy to function, we have to have shared facts, shared beliefs, and shared goals. And it's going to be more difficult going forward to have enough of the population agree on something. So as a result, we become more vulnerable to attacks from other countries that might not agree with our own agenda. And so it's quite dangerous if this continues, if we don't course correct. Other countries are seeing how they can manipulate our population. So yes, it will definitely affect us and the way we live. And also it will probably introduce, more opportunity for populists and authoritarianism to creep into our system, because in times of uncertainty, people want somebody to come in and tell them what's safe, what's okay. And those tend to be populists.
Philip, you study conspiracy theories. Do you believe deep down that it's possible that we can get ahead of this?
There's a part of me that says it's impossible, but I can't let myself believe that, simply because we have so much to lose if we let that happen. So there are things that we can do in society. We can increase things like media literacy, but media literacy alone will not change that problem. One of the things that I've been advocating for is just get back into your local community, meet the people locally. We are so immersed in our online lives, but we forget that we're embedded, in society where there are people and things that you have to interact with. Find out what, your neighbors are concerned about, your, baseball groups, your church group, and so on.
Yeah, talk to your neighbors, even if you disagree. Let's get back out there and talk to each other. Philip, great to have you on the program today.
No problem. All right, thank you.
Remember Gerald Tracy from our season opener? He's the editor from the Eganville Leader, originally slated to close this year, but here he is with an update.
Well, things have completely turned around. We have sold the newspaper, and it's going to continue on much in the same fashion as it has for the past 123 years, so we can't ask for anything better than that.
You can find Gerald's full interview on our YouTube page at Big If True TVO.
Worried about misinformation overload? Come to Big If True to find out what's real and what's not. Check out our Instagram page for exclusive content and subscribe to our YouTube channel or watch full episodes on our website. Email us at bigiftrue@tvo.org if you have a burning question or brilliant idea. Big If True, fighting misinformation one story at a time.
Conspiracy theories have the power to shape the people we love and how they act and see the world. As you heard today, there are AI tools that can help in those tough discussions. And remember, empathy goes a long way, especially with your family. I'm Molly Thomas. Thanks for watching. We will see you next Sunday or anytime online.